Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this exciting panel with pioneers in VR, AR, and mixed reality. So we have amazing people on the panel tonight to give you great, inspiring advice on how to crack the elusive storytelling problem in immersive content. So I'm Jessie Kim, a co-founder of the XR Alliance competition, and our mission is to solve a problem that we have in the industry today, which is great technologists not communicating very well with great storytellers. So we aim to bridge the gap between the two teams and groups with great resources, templates, and identifying the top talent when it comes to storytelling. We want to solve a problem, one of our biggest challenges today, which is content and how to create great content. VentureBeat released a report that found that over 37% of the market found that inadequate content offerings is a big problem today. So how do we solve that problem? We're hoping to help solve this problem and empower talented creatives with tools and resources and support them to develop their best possible work and help bring their visions to life. So the talented novelist and inventor Margaret Atwood said, "You're never going to kill storytelling because it's built into the human plan. We come with it." And the talented storyteller, Eric Darnell from Baobab Studios, he said, "Storytelling is a time-based art form that has a physical impact of releasing chemicals in our bodies, including cortisol, oxytocin, and dopamine, throughout storytelling. It's something that has helped humans evolve and is part of what makes us human." These are the founders. Dylan Harris is our program director. Greg Gertmanian from Slated is our program manager. And myself and Tim are the co-chairs. These are our current judges. We are also recruiting more judges. So we have Sarah Stumbo, a prolific XR producer with Unity. We have Jonny Ahdout, Director of Development at Within. Jenna Seiden, and she was formerly at Vive, Microsoft, and CAA. We have Ian Forrester, a co-founder of VR Playhouse. Heather Raikes, Creative Director for Mixed Reality Studios at Microsoft. And Adam Costco, a Lumiere Award-winning VR director. And if you know any good potential judges, please let me know. And our submissions are up to 10 minutes in length. We provide templates and resources in case you need help writing. And we are accepting submissions soon. So if you're interested in entering, go to the xralliance.com and put in your email. We're launching today at VRLA. We are accepting final submissions by August with an early submission deadline. Winners are announced in October, and we have our development lab in November. If you have any questions, feel free to email us. And please visit our website and enter your email if you're interested. So I'll let Jonathan from Baobab Studios take it away with our stellar panel.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. And thank you for having us here. I'm Jonathan Flesher. I'm from Baobab Studios. We develop immersive VR theater, that's our theater applications and animated applications. But I'm not here to talk about my company. I'm here to talk about immersive storytelling with our panelists. So I'll let them go ahead and introduce themselves.
I'll start. I'm Heather Raikes. I'm currently a creative director for Mixed Reality Studios at Microsoft. I have a kind of longstanding passion for immersive storytelling and three-dimensional media experience design. I've done a lot of previous experimentation of a PhD in digital arts and experimental media, and have been obsessed with how to create powerful experiences with three-dimensional media for a few decades now.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maria Essig. I'm the gaming lead for Google VR and AR initiatives. I work with third-party studios focusing on creating interactive stories using gaming format for new upcoming platforms. My background is in video games. I'm lucky enough to work in multiple areas of this medium. And my personal passion is this magical interaction between creativity and new technology, where gamers and storytellers can actually turn their ideas in a very unique to consumers way.
Hey everyone, I'm Jonny Ahdout. I'm Director of Development at Within. We're a distribution platform that's looking to connect the world with incredible immersive experiences. And personally, I get to work on new content development, putting talent together with cool projects in an effort to create worlds that users like yourself can experience and enjoy.
Sally, Director of Immersive Development at Ryot, content creation studio from film to short films to VR, AR, 360. We're doing it kind of across the spectrum. I've done more than 200 immersive projects to date. They're doing more and more within the game engine space.
Great, thank you. Let me kick it off with talking a little bit about just storytelling. Storytelling's been around since the dawn of humanity. First, in an oral tradition, then on into written pictograms. But more recently, in the last century, we've developed a very strong language around the traditional formats of film and television. That developed a kind of what we call language of film and television. And if you go to most film schools around the world, they're teaching that same thing, pans, soft cuts, hard cuts, all these types of things that are the techniques that are used in that format to tell stories. How does that change? I'd like to hear from each of you. When you go into an immersive environment, whether it's in VR or AR or MR, how does that storytelling change, and how are we figuring out that language?
Start? I think while there are some elements that are carried over, I think it is fundamentally a really radical shift. I think that the participant is engaged in a fundamentally different way in VR or AR, that our brain and our senses are activated in a different way. I think in a great immersive story, the storyteller is first and foremost establishing an authentic feeling of presence in the story space, but I think building and evolving experience of presence into the way that the story unfolds is really critical to immersive media, and that's really quite new. I also think...
Do you mean more in like a passive viewer versus active viewer?
It can go either way, but thinking holistically about just the embodied presence of the participant as a central story element, and letting it be dynamic, thinking about how that shifts and how that changes, and how the perspective and the character and the sensory experience of the participant is evolving as the story unfolds, as kind of an integrated element. And along with that, I think just what really excites me is that I think a different kind of impact is possible when we're able to engage the senses holistically in new ways that are really made possible by immersive media.
Jumping off of that, kind of talking about the vernacular of TV and film and how that's developed over 100 years, and how we're just starting to develop a lot of that now, and what translates from TV and film to immersive content, what has no backwards translation. Things like Pearl, I think, are really interesting, which they had a virtual reality version of the project as well as a linear 2D version of the project. And the director talked about how he used twice as many cuts in the linear version versus the virtual reality version. Kind of what that means in terms of allowing the user to be present in that space and requiring more time versus that kind of quicker pace that you can get with linear, because users are used to it. I think editing is still really interesting, kind of this element of everything being spatial. So you can imagine if you're in a virtual reality and you're in a car going really fast and you jump cut to a stationary POV, kind of that spatial whiplash that happens in your brain. These are all the things I think we're tackling daily.
I love one of the things that you and I talked after the Tribeca Film Festival about their piece, Dinner.
Dinner Party.
Yeah, Dinner Party. I thought that was a really great way of directing, because one of the key problems in immersive kind of storytelling is that there is no frame. So how do you direct the viewer's attention? Maybe you could talk a little bit about the implementation in that piece and some of the things you experimented with.
Yeah, so Dinner Party basically tells the story of the first alien abduction in the United States. And what we ended up doing for the opening shot was this oneer, right? And talking about how do you give back that control to the director. So the director, Angel Manuel Soto, who's a really fantastic immersive creator, was very, very adamant about having this long, slow oneer that takes you basically using a techno crane down through a pre-constructed scene with no ceiling that was kind of like composited in afterwards. So using as a live action piece, the slow camera move that moves down into this dinner party around the different guests, Goodfellas-esque. And people come out of that project and are kind of blown away specifically because they're like, oh wow, I see the director's grip on this project. You feel that Fincherous vibe to it that has been lacking in a lot of content. I'm a firm believer in cinematic 360, so I'm very, yeah.
Felt it myself.
I think when we talk about gaming as overall, gamers are more prepared to immersive storytelling just based on the medium itself. Gamer always take an active part in revealing the story, and story in many cases just presented through the elements within the world you place the player. And an interesting evolution of VR and AR helps gamers to merge the differences between verticals and kind of interact with traditional filmmakers, learn from them how to reveal the story in a little bit less aggressive gaming way, and together with theirs, empower traditional filmmakers to add gaming elements and kind of like excitement and Easter eggs, and not necessarily guide the attention of the viewer, but give them something to interact in the environment with so they can learn more without actual telling.
So much of the gaming space, I think the indie gaming scene is awesome,
yes.
and its impact on immersive content is really apparent. Things like the old platformer Braid, which kind of like, time moves when you do, is you see that in something like Superhot, which is wildly powerful and just beyond epic. So thinking about the vernacular of TV and film on one side and what's translating, but also what can you bring from the indie gaming scene where they are testing kind of abstract things, the game everything. I can't believe there's no VR port for that.
Yeah.
It was just like wild.
Or if we talk about like the basics as like Minecraft, there is no actual story, but everyone makes the story while you play through it. Or like side scrollers, for example, Mushroom 11, there is no storyline at all, but while you progress, you see all the elements around you in the background that helps you by the like 5th or 6th level have a very deep understanding of the world around you. And that's a storytelling in your own hand, in your own imagination.
Jonny, around this interactivity, one of the things that video games can do is kind of layer that interactive experience and create your own story. But as a director of a piece, how do you maintain pacing and tension and things like that when you layer that interactivity and someone could just wander around a room and play with stuff before they go on?
It's a good question, and it's a very big challenge. I mean, it starts with the intention and your approach to this medium to begin with. And I think one of the things to keep in mind, as Heather was saying earlier, is that there's a fundamental difference in this medium to others. Mainly that instead of in film and in TV and in books and all other storytelling mediums that came before, you're generally taking in a story that happened to other people, and it's being told to you. And sometimes you project yourself into the shoes of the protagonist so that you could go on that journey with them. In VR and AR, you're living that story firsthand. It's no longer about having a story being told to you, but a world set up for you to experience and create your own story within. And so how do we approach cinematic VR that's based in a game engine with interactivity and control it down a narrative where people start in one place and end in the other? In the future, when we have incredible machine learning and AI, and we can have characters running around the world that react to every little thing that you do, you can make that process invisible and guide them through a story that's holistically their own that they control. Today, we're at a point where we need to craft those moments behind the curtain, give people the illusion of control, that they feel like this is 100% their experience that they can control moving forward. But in actuality, what we're doing is crafting one or two decisions along the way, hopefully holding people's hands down through this journey so that they come out of it feeling like they lived it and it was theirs, but it was still a narrative that you had constructed and guided them through.
I'd love you to comment a little bit about some of the latest pieces that Within has been experimenting with, Life of Us and the most recent Superstar, which I had the fortune of seeing.
Lamb Child Superstar.
Yeah, the title's very long. So how does that play into that kind of idea of interacting with your environment and creating the story and having that other person, actually a real AI or I, there with you in that experience?
Totally. I mean, something that we've been really interested in over the past year, and all the projects we've been making over the past year have been concerned with the shared experience. The idea that you can take multiple people from across the world, put them in a virtual space, and allow them to collaborate as different creatures in worlds that are completely impossible to join in this physical reality that we're in every day. And that really comes from a philosophy that the best and most transformative experiences of our lives are generally shared with other people. Whether you're going to a concert or going on a date or going on a hike with someone or going scuba diving, which, by the way, if you haven't, highly recommend it. It's amazing. When you share those experiences with other people, you connect more, you bond more, and you feel more free than isolated. And VR does get a bad rap for being quite isolating. There are those pictures that go around of a room full of people like this, all wearing headsets, completely disconnected from one another. And we're trying to build a future where, regardless of who you are and where you are, you can connect with other people in a shared virtual setting. So that's how we've been approaching this new chapter of storytelling in VR is, what are the best experiences we can give people together that they couldn't possibly ever do in the real world? And the results of that have been really cool.
Yeah, it's a weird, like, kind of full circle, because you have that traditional picture of the family sitting around the dinner table all looking at their smartphones, not interacting, not being social, not being present. And if you put them into an isolating device like an immersive headset, but you give them that kind of those degrees of freedom to interact with each other in a way that actually might be able to bring them back together.
Totally. I mean, you'd be amazed what happens when you put two people who can't even speak the same language into a low poly forest where they both get to be gorillas. They'll immediately, our project Life of Us is built so that 2 to 4 people can evolve from amoeba all the way into the singularity as like dancing robots in disco space. And in one stage, your gorillas running through the forest, and I've literally put people who can't speak the same language through this project together, and they're beating their chests, and they're grunting, and they're crawling around on the floor, and they come out of this thing hugging as if they just went on this like magical ride together. And a lot of it has to do with what happens when you disassociate people from their bodies, disassociate them from their immediate environment and the life that they're living, and let them play a role or play a character that's completely outside of the bounds of what they can do in the space.
It's a great experience. I'd like to shift gears a little bit and ask a little bit more about, in that development process, kind of what are your biggest challenges? I mean, you've touched on some of them here, but really highlight that for the audience and maybe talk a little bit about what you guys are trying to do to address those.
Reading pitches that include the word immersion and empathy, which are red flags. Great words, totally makes sense. It's like saying like, oh, I'm going to go to the concert and it's going to be loud. It's like, I'm going to do something in immersive. I'm going to do something in a VR headset. It's going to be immersive. It's inherent to the medium. I think we really need to push past that now. We we had a good run, self-include, everyone need to get educated, but really thinking about the first thing when I sit down with creators to talk about story is, why this medium? Why are we doing this in augmented reality? Why is this story best told as a virtual reality piece? It's, in many cases, a lot easier and a lot cheaper to do it in different mediums. So really making sure that the story is integrally told through this specific medium. And if it can't be justified, it's okay. Think of other ideas.
I think our Chief Creative Officer, Eric, would very much agree with you. He says, it's the story. It's always the story. He's like, a great story can be told on a piece of paper with a pencil, and it'll be phenomenal. It's why South Park works. It's not the greatest animation out there, but people love it, myself included, because the story is great.
Challenges in VR and AR. I mean, the obvious one is that we have no rubric or basis of comparison, that we're all diving into something new that we have instincts about, but nothing to really reference against. But the main one for me that I've come across in the past year, which is also a virtue, I think, of the industry, is you have all these people from different backgrounds, whether it's film or gaming. I mean, there's a lot of tension between those two right there in terms of how you go about building a project. And it's great. I think you need people who have expertise in all different fields to come together and chip away at the marble of what this medium can be. But when you have people who are used to the process of script, storyboard, shoot, post, release, versus MVP prototype test, MVP prototype test, MVP prototype test, it's a lot of a learning curve to get a bunch of creators on board with, when we don't even know what the perfect process for VR and AR even is to begin with. So that's been quite challenging, but it's a result of one of the things that I think is the greatest virtue of our industry.
From our perspective, it's already super hard to just write and create a compelling story when, as creators, you have to deal with the technological issues and the whole fact that the back end of this medium is still evolving and growing. Our main focus is to simplify the process for creators, to give some shortcuts, rendering solutions, SDKs that may help. And overall, I think the whole industry should finally come to some sort of the shared standard, at least when we talk about deployment platforms. Because yes, gamers have been dealing with multiple inputs, consoles, PC, mobile, all the versions of mobile phones already, but it makes process so way harder for them to actually unleash their creativity, because they constantly need to think, oh, how many controllers this headset have? How do I guide it within this medium? Can I be as powerful as I want?
And no, I'd agree with you. I come from the gaming industry as well as a background. And traditionally, platforms have really consolidated down to about 2 or 3 main platforms. Google and Apple on the phones, Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo on the consoles. That is a very difficult problem that the industry is struggling with, is how do I create something and then get it broadly distributed without doing a ton of packaging work where I have to...
And still, if we talk about VR specifically, right now I think everyone is trying to find out this mean viable headset. Yes, we have the high end, we have as low end as cardboard, but everyone right now is experimenting. 6 DOF, 3 DOF, 2 controllers, 1 controller, and that's hard on creators because you have to either pivot very quickly or wait and see what's happening.
I think I would echo the lack of truly effective patterns and models to build upon, largely because I think we really need them, and we really need to invest in the creative exploration to discover those patterns, those design patterns, if you will, that are unique to immersive experience design. Because in the absence of having that process or the results of that process in a kind of mature and usable state, I think we just poured over a lot of conventions from 2D media, which are marginally successful at best. They're interesting, they're passable, but I think that we really, as a community, need to kind of invest in that creative R&D to find these new models that will really unleash the potential of the medium moving forward.
Great. Let me ask each of you, what is, kind of a piece that you haven't done that's not your own, that really spoke to you from a narrative or storytelling perspective? And get a little into the details as to why. What was it, that thing that grabbed you and made you say, wow, that thing or that technique that they were experimenting with really worked for me?
Where thoughts go. I'm a huge champion of this project. Lucas Risotto is a fantastic immersive creator. Basically, you're put into a low poly world. You see a giant question emblazed above you. And there are all these little thought creatures that kind of pop up, and you can pull any one of them close to you, and you hear responses from real people to what their answers were to that question. And then you have the opportunity to add your answer to the question to the cloud. And it kind of aggregates these kind of over time. And it was at Tribeca. It's been at a couple different places. And it's really interesting to see the evolution of it. And I think here demoing, you go through one question, but the overall experience is 5 questions. You get a 5-question arc. And that conceptually, great new format for storytelling that is wholly unique to virtual reality, that forces you in an isolated situation to, answer some questions that some are really fun, some get really, really personal. So I have nothing but good thoughts to say about that project.
I will echo Jack on this one because I'm a huge fan as well. I think as the gamer, my ultimate dream is to have a persistence user-generated world in VR where everyone can co-create, but examples like that actually empower everyone to stay connected and see how your personal gameplay or thinking, or in this case, your personal story enlarged the experience for everybody else.
That's awesome. So what beyond that is what's your second one? I'm not letting you off the hot seat.
I still am. It's quite old at this point, this experience, but I'm still a huge fan of fantastic contraptions. I think there's nothing but pure fun and joy. They bring out your inner child. If you haven't done it, the principle of this game, you have a magical backpack behind you and a little fluffy cat that helps you with different tools. And your job is to put together a moving vehicle that can physically get to the final from point A to point B. It's super simple. There is no rocket science there, but you have so much fun interacting with each little detail in this world and see it's pure fun. And that's fundamentally the excitement of any game.
In terms of narrative and storytelling, I think Mayubi from Felix and Paul is pretty special, and merits mention in this context. I think there are where you're the viewer, as the viewer are playing the part of this little robot who's been gifted to this child, and you come into the family, and you're really part of this whole world and the story of the child with the robot as it unfolds. I just think there are so many just kind of brilliant and innovative techniques being explored there in terms of both presence-based storytelling, and your experience of presence as Mayubi it has an arc, it has a journey, it's changing and evolving as the story unfolds, and just I think it's very successful in reimagining the viewer as a participant in the story as well.
And you get Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, and an 80s theme. Yeah, so it's great.
And that was cool.
There's a director that you've been working with recently, Matthias Schellberg, who's been experimenting with immersive theater virtual reality over the course of the past year. And 2 projects of his, one, the Alice virtual play, and 2, Jack, which is a Baobab project. In both, you walk into a physical space with a headset on, and there are live actors in that space with you who have mocap suits on them. And in Jack, this example, that mocap actress is puppeteering a frog who is your mother, and you can speak to her, and you can touch her, and you can hug her, and there are other things around the room that you can pick up in the virtual space and interact with. And it's the perfect example of, I think, what all of us are trying to build to in the future, where you can walk into a virtual space and talk to anybody and touch anything, and a story can unfold that directly involves everything that you're saying and every which way that you're moving. But you get to be a frog, and your mom can be a frog, and you can connect with her physically in that way. I think it's a beautiful example of how you can really enable a user to be, first and foremost, a protagonist very, very naturally without any abstraction, and let them live inside of a cartoon, so to speak.
Yeah, thank you. That was a pretty interesting project to pull off, and still has some more chapters left in it. One of the most interesting things about that was the ability of the actress to play that kind of AI. And coming from the gaming industry, the gaming industry always thinks, hey, I'm in a shooter and there's a guard over there and they're on a little kind of pattern to walk around there. But that's not really AI that we're talking about from a storytelling perspective. We still have a long way to go before the computational power is there to really drive that type of experience. So that's why having an actress in there with you can give you that personalized experience. And I know Facebook's experimenting a little bit with some distance actors and actresses playing in their piece, in an upcoming piece, which I think is also very interesting.
Well, and Jack, I was just going to say, I think a lot of people that work in immersive try and break everything all the time, trying to say, where are the limits? Where's the edge of the world? So when I went through Jack, the actress was phenomenal. I was dancing in the middle of the room, and this was a serious moment, supposed to be doing things, and she very naturally guided you back to the story. So that immersive theater, dynamically reacting to what the user's doing, fantastic. The great actress, whoever was doing.
Thank you. Now let's move on to kind of comparing, contrasting. I think this is a really interesting topic for both Microsoft and Google. How does storytelling differ when you're in a virtual reality environment versus an AR environment, particularly given the kind of the limitations of the various headsets that are out there, particularly on the AR side? How are you guys as storytellers kind of thinking about those experiences with those different form factors?
Yeah, I can start from here. So if we take into the account the current state of mass adoption of VR and AR, like the form factors that we have at the moment, one of the biggest differences and challenges is in AR, you still need to think about real world and how you can bounce your idea and interaction from what the final player and user sees around them, how they interact with the real world, and how the story can either contradict the everyday actions or in some sort enlarge it. In VR, you have this power of actually building the entire story and entire world without this connection. Obviously, there are cons and pros to both approaches. To my mind, in some form and fashion, AR storytelling is way more complex, as people don't have this disconnection, and it's really hard to prompt their imagination to forget that the world they live in has still the same principles and physicality and fundamentals.
Yeah, at this stage, we are largely applying AR to enterprise applications and to transforming workflows, whereas VR is more of a consumer and entertainment focus. It's not an exclusive division, but that's the gist of the current focus. And I've actually been doing quite a lot of work with HoloLens and with AR, so I'm kind of just trying to think about that question in light of the projects that I'm currently working on, because they're, in any kind of experience, particularly these sort of first generation, first wave experiences, story is integral to it. The way that you're working with rhythm, with flow, with the arc of the experience, the way that you're engaging someone in new information and interacting with the physical world in new ways. I mean, there's story that's so deeply built into all of it. But I would say that, in AR, the physical environment is a key player. And so that's kind of bringing another major element into the mix. You're still working with three-dimensional media. You're still working with this much more holistic, multi-sensory experience design, and you're also working with physical reality.
Jonny and Jake, how, as kind of creatives and storytellers, do you see differing challenges with AR, and what any comments on projects that you're thinking about exploring there?
AR is really, really hard right now. We've been experimenting and prototyping quite a bit, in particular with handheld AR, like Google's AR Core and Apple's AR Kit, to figure out how we can approach storytelling in that format. And when you're asking the user to hold their phone up as a lens to see things that their naked eye can't see in their natural environment, we went through a lot of pivots where we constantly had to remind ourselves, no, this is taking place in their room, and this is taking place on their tabletop, and how does all of that play into the story? I've actually been revisiting some of my favorite movies from my childhood, like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and Space Jam. Any movie out there where you have live animated characters running around a real world space, I think is a really good example of how we need to think about augmented reality storytelling that's character-based. Again, it goes back to the issue of how do you create characters that are looking up at you and interacting with you in a way that feels natural and real. There's one app out there that's super simple but pretty addicting and really fun called AR Dragon, which I highly recommend you guys check out. You basically have like a baby dragon that hatches out of an egg in front of you that, for all intents and purposes, acts like a little puppy. And you can pet it, and you can feed it, and you can play catch with it. And they do a nice job of, in very simple ways, making you believe like this little creature is alive and looking to you for like sustenance and to grow. But it's a good example of what you were pointing to earlier, which is like how, in the meantime, do we build experiences that in very simple ways get you to buy into the fact that you have full control and this is a living, breathing character in front of you. There are simple ways to go about that, and having a dragon with a puppy dog sticking out of his mouth and looking up at you, asking for more, will quickly get you to buy into that.
I know my son is waiting for like a yokai watch, if you're familiar with that style experience where he can see the different yokais out there running around.
I can't believe there's nothing around Pokemon Snap, frankly. It still remains the #1 thing. But I think getting back to providing, I think maybe it was the earlier panel talking about providing artists with a limited sandbox. What I think has actually been great is our project Terminal 3 is an augmented reality experience using the HoloLens, which there isn't a ton of narrative content around, but this really young creator, Asad J. Malik, who's actually a junior in college, made this project that's really, really powerful. And it's pretty simple. You're sitting there, you're interviewing someone. You are in the persona of an airport security officer, interviewing a perceived Muslim American. It's all voice powered, so you choose the different questions they're asked, and the hologram responds. But it does this really, really powerful thing on two fronts, which both puts you as the antagonist kind of in the story, but also viewing this perceived Muslim American as kind of the protagonist, and this duality of perspective of kind of an observer, but also actively creating this tension. And it starts off the character starts off very abstracted, kind of digitized, and as you get to know them, they become more human. And I think that's a really powerful use of augmented reality that, it doesn't require a lot, just you sitting in a chair, talking to the hologram, also sitting in a chair, but people came out of this at Tribeca absolutely bawling. And it just shows you don't have to do crazy, dynamic, everything's changing all the time, real world reacting to cars. It can be something very simple if it's done really well and with intention that matches the story that you're trying to tell.
I will say, after seeing that, I didn't get a chance to see the experience, but it was located right next to ours. But I saw all the things going on, and you could see in there. I was blown away because for me, I was always of the opinion that having a magic window and requiring just a blank tabletop for an AR experience or a floor or something like that was so limiting, and it was kind of just a small phenomena that wasn't going to have real legs as a story. And this kind of opened my mind. Yes, it was a simplified interior, it was a blank interior, but it was allowing you to tell that story in that space, and it was emotionally powerful because I could see the people coming out as they were coming out. Let's talk a little bit about the future. What are you guys most interested in or most excited for over the next 5 years? Because I guess that's the standard length of time that we prognosticate on.
Next generation.
What does that mean?
We are talking about next generation storytelling. It belongs to the next generation. Lucas Risotto, Essig and Malik, these young creators who are growing up digitally native, thinking spatially native. Our job as adults with old dead brains is to support them, allow them to innovate, give them the resources and the rocket fuel to go wherever they want, as fast as they can get there. I'm a very firm believer in this.
On that note, just continue pushing towards the adoption, making sure that as many people and different backgrounds and far away from tech are educated on how to interact with the environment. And I think on that side, immersive theater, live events, and general kind of bring back the culture of live concerts, but with power of VR and AR will be a huge help.
I think I would say innovation in content. I think we are really just at the beginning of this exploration. I was thinking about that. It took 75 years after the invention of the printing press for the format of the book to be discovered. If you think about early films and what they look like in relation to how we understand the medium now, and largely really static imitations of theater, even the early web, I think it's just really exciting to project into the future, unleashing more of the full potential of this medium. And I think that content developers are going to do that, and I think we're just getting started. So I'm really excited about what's to come.
And I have to echo that. I constantly say that I think immersive kind of experiences in VR, AR is held to an unfair kind of standard. I think a lot of people compare it to the internet and video on demand that emerged and looked back and had this large body of content, plus the advent of user-generated content for things like YouTube, to create this massive catalog. And my mother, she always reminds me of when radios first came out and then televisions first came out. They were on for like an hour or two, and then they went dark. So the family would have dinner, and then they'd go gather in the living room and they'd watch the hour or listen to the hour of content that was available, and then that was it. And you never expected more out of that thing. And I think from my perspective right now, we're really kind of trying to catch up on the content side while the tech is evolving.
I completely agree. And I think I've been working in the VR space for only 3 years now, and it seems like we're just starting to shake our legs off of all the backgrounds that we come from and all the previous mediums that we used to work in. And to Jake's point, the next generation of creators don't have to shake anything off. They're coming into VR and looking at what its potential holds at face value. And I'm really looking forward to seeing more experimentation and more people coming as creators to the format asking, what's the most incredible, wonderful, joyful experience that I can author for someone to have that's not possible in this real world? And I'm very much looking forward to more of that cropping up over the next 5 years and hopefully much more.
Started to see it. The new iPad commercials are really interesting, because it's all about kids doing their homework. And when I did homework, it was pen and paper on the bus, and it was totally fine. The commercial shows the use of the iPad, augmented reality, you're changing things, you're working together, using the cloud. It's crazy. And like that, I just need to echo it again of like, kids are really thinking about this natively. It's cool, and you're allowed to skip a lot of steps that normally there's no education necessary. They put on a headset. Anyone under 15, they get it instantly. There's no uptick on it. You don't have to explain anything. They put it on, they're ready to go.
They're not even asking like, oh, is this a movie? Oh, is this a game? It's like, oh no, okay, this is a world. I'm going to start walking around and interact with things.
And that's the most important thing that's shifting. Yeah. There's no biasness towards one medium. You just go for the experience. Mm-hmm.
I love to tell the story again, my 80-year-old mother versus my 6-year-old son. I put my 6-year-old son in a headset, play our first movie, Invasion, with the bunny rabbit, because it's very kid appropriate. And he immediately gets up and starts trying to play with the bunny and touch it and stuff like that. Whereas my mom just sits there. Like, Mom, move your head. She's like, so I very much agree where there's going to be great experimentation from people that are coming from, film, television, video games, but true creativity will likely come out of left field from the kids and the kind of young adults who have no preconceptions about, oh, I have 2 TVs strapped to my head. Like, that's not the way they think.
The college programs that already have immersive programs, Lance Weiler out at NYU, the digital storytelling lab, it's just crazy stuff is coming out of some of these places.
Super excited. Well,
Columbia,
I want to thank.
sorry, it was not NYU.
Well, I want to thank each of you of the panels. Thank you very much, and thank you to the audience for listening to us.
Thank you.